The Big House, as the main homestead is called, has played host to heads of government and royalty in its 50 years. About 150 Europeans live at the homestead settlement on Victoria River Downs, or VRD as the locals call it. Several hundred Aborigines also call it their home. It would be fair to say that until recent times, not much thought has gone into the design of this widespread conglomeration of houses, workshops and stores that are built almost entirely from corrugated iron sheets trucked in over the years. The huge generating plant powers the air conditioning systems in most of the buildings, operates the fuel pumps and the refrigeration plants in the general store. It may have been okay a century ago to face the dust and flies and heat with a bit of salt beef for your tucker and a lean-to for shelter, but today that's simply not good enough. Cattle property management is like any other business. You have to be able to attract the right people away from the good life of the city to a lifestyle that's still very remote and often lonely. In many cases, that means being able to buy goods that city people regard as essentials.
Been selling bar soap? Yeah. How many?
Gwen McCanty came to VRD 13 years ago. Within 2 years, her husband Gilbert had become the manager, a position he's held ever since.
If you had to say what I don't like about the place most, it would be the lack of news and the lack of communications and knowing what's going on in the world. We can't get radio reception. Papers we get sent in, but they're usually about a week old before we get them. So, you know, I'd love to be able to turn the radio on and get the news and some of the shows.
For Gwen McCanty, the job of postmistress for the settlement is another of the many demands on her time. In early days, women in the outback were considered a strange breed. When a man accepted a job in the inland, his wife, more likely than not, would remain behind in the city. Fortunately, the days of the horseback mail service have gone. Ground transport was always prone to seasonal change. For 6 months during the wet season, stations throughout the north were entirely cut off by floodwaters. With all-weather airstrips and a twice-weekly charter service, there is now some hope that the mail will eventually get through. Even as recently as 20 years ago, these Aboriginal children would have lived their whole lives through without being able to read or write. The girls would have been married and had children in their early teens. The boys would have ended up in the stock camps. Today, on all the major cattle stations, they have their own schools.
With my hands on my head, what have we here? These are my eye blinkers, my teacher dear. May blinker, I blinker.
Yet there are special cultural problems associated with Aborigines. Traditionally, Aborigines are nomadic people. It is not unusual for parents to pull their children out of class and go walkabout in the middle of the school year, much to the frustration of the teacher.
Main blinker, I blinker, smell boxer, nicky nacky nacky nose. That's what they taught me when I went to school. With my hands on my head.
Other children on the station are taught through the School of the Air. Before the days of radio schooling, these youngsters would have had to leave home at the age of 5 to board at a primary school in one of the capital cities.
Were so tall as she
The School of the Air has made an important contribution to life in the inland, for it has held together the family unit.
Gwen, can you ask Pigeonhole what time they're expecting the helicopter? Over.
Yes, okay, Norma. If you stand by 1 minute, I'll get Kate on the telephone at Pigeonhole and I'll find out where the
Since
helicopters have to
1928,
go and
radio
what
has
time
been the
they're
key to
expected.
outback
So just stand by and I'll get back to you
communications.
shortly.
For the first 40 years, emergency communications from Victoria River was a 4-day ride to Katherine,
Hello, Darwin.
which was the nearest link with the overland
Hello,
telegraph.
Hello, Darwin. It's VRD here, 1125. I'd like to put a call through to Pigeonhole, please. It's radio telephone.
Fortunately, they've come a long way
1155.
since those days, and a high-frequency radio telephone system has replaced the old pedal wireless.
Hello, Kate. How are you? Fine, I'm well, thanks. I've just got a message for Gary from Helimuster.
Times have not always been good on VRD. In the first 100 years, more than half her owners went broke. Successive governments complained about the lack of improvements by the various lessees, and in retaliation, large sections of the lease were reallocated as they expired. Delamere, Montegini, Humbert River, Camfield all passed to other hands, as did VRD's now closest neighbour, Killarney. Killarney is small by outback standards, just over 2,500 square kilometres. When Bill Tapp took her over in the mid-60s, Killarney was underdeveloped and a losing proposition. Within 20 years, it had become a showplace of the outback, small enough to be manageable and yet large enough to be profitable. Killarney, although primarily a cattle property, has one of the finest quarter-horse studs in the north. Cattlemen from all over the territory buy Killarney's quarter horses rather than break in their own.
Redwood horses, like the one Ben's riding now, they're a bit touchy at the start, but once you get them going, they're pretty good stock horses, you know, they've got a lot of cow sense. Yeah.
Breaking in horses for stock work is a time-consuming task, demanding patience, skill, a lot of guts, and the nerve to stay in the saddle. Each horse is different in its response to the bridle, saddle, and finally, the rider. How you handle each horse is a matter of experience. Breaking horses is regarded almost as a recreation on most stations, but on Killarney, it's very much a business. Once the process starts, they don't stop working a horse until he's fully broken and ready to ride in a muster. It's a long process, but one that's always been closely associated with these men of the outback.
Two together.
Yarding cattle is a dangerous business. Those cattle to go to market are pushed into one pen, the breeders are sent to another, calves are separated, and those cattle not in the best of condition will need to be dipped. The judgment of which beast goes where is left to one man, VRD's manager, Gilbert McCanty. McCanty has successfully managed the big run since 1974 to become the second longest serving manager in the station's history.
Down and dip.
Only his decisions here and in other drafting yards throughout the property will largely depend whether VRD profits or fails during the year.